another reason why I left religion, Christianity, church, and fundamentalism is that the church teaches its members, or hides from their members, that the Bible does not condemn women, human trafficking, and selling people into slavery. So those who've been to churches where you've heard the majority of Bible stories about Noah, Jesus, Abraham, Jonah, the 12 disciples, David, Goliath, usually they leave out certain elements and plot points to cater to the age group that's usually included in the story. It was quite a shock as a young adult opening up a Bible for the first time. And a lot of the stories had changes to plots, endings, or certain parts of the story were completely omitted. I mean, I remember as a child hearing Samson and Delilah, and they cleverly left out certain parts of that story. I learned about the 12 tribes of Israel. They never talked about certain illegal crimes that some of the 12 tribes of Israel did, such as murder, solicitation, death threats, kidnapping. So, honor killing. That's a good one. Not a good one, but a good point to make. And I always wondered if the reason why churches leave out certain details from biblical stories is due to the age appropriateness, or because they don't want to have uncomfortable conversations. There were a few occasions in the Bible where women were treated with more dignity, more respect than other nations and the current climate. Christians like to use the phrase, but we do better than non-Christians. Being better than terrible doesn't make you good. I mean, I grew up in Southern Baptist, and they did not admit slavery was wrong until 1995. Yeah, 130 years after the slaves had been freed, they decided, you know what, it's time, we need to make a statement about this. And it wasn't because they made a statement, it's because people kept asking, why haven't you made a statement? And if you read the Bible, and most translations are pretty similar, they either add or detract or change different words and definitions, and every denomination has their own official or most popular translation that they use, popular translation in which churches, or at least the big mega churches, interpret their Bible. And very rarely, if ever, did I ever hear stories that included, slavery, except when the Jewish people were targeted. Then that's when they said slavery was bad. If you read the Bible, you will see passages where it actually tells their father how they can sell their daughters into sexual slavery, how to sell your child into slavery, when you could not sell your wife into slavery. The Bible never condemns slavery. Because, I was told as a young person, because 1 out of 3 people in the ancient world were slaves. They either induced themselves into slavery to cover their debt, someone they knew sold them into slavery, or they had committed a crime which got them into slavery. One of the biggest stories in the Bible, Joseph is a prime example, where he was sold into slavery by people he knew, and then he was sold again when he was falsely accused of bad behavior. The Bible never condemns slavery. It never condemns how men treat women. It was always, we have to have a higher standard than the infidels. Which, interesting fact, almost every time the Jewish people attacked a country, tribe, or group of people that wasn't Jewish, they actually had rules on who they killed, who they married by force, and what the spoils of war were. Spoiler alert, women were included in the spoils. And just because you marry a woman, you seize and take off, doesn't make you a better person than the person from another tribe or another country, what they do to women. So the Bible never condemns slavery. It never says that slavery is wrong, that it's inappropriate and it's dehumanizing and it violates human rights. It never says that. Which is ironic because the people who killed the Apostle Paul, supposedly, the Romans, 1 out of 3 of Roman adults were slaves. And people owned each other. They could split up families and sell families. Even our founding fathers owned slaves. They sometimes owned the offspring of a female slave. I think Thomas Jefferson was a good example of this. And it's hard to grow up and realize when you read documents in American history like all men are created equal. The people who wrote these documents owned human beings. They owned children. They owned unborn children, especially if they owned the mother who was pregnant. The people who wrote the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, owned human beings. That's a historical fact. We put these people on statues and on buildings that house national treasures. But it wasn't until I was a teenager that I found out that they had owned people. You look at a lot of the monuments and houses that U.S. presidents owned, like Monticello. These were partially or entirely built on slave labor. Our country was built on slavery, racism, every type of prejudice, whether it was gender orientation, race, religion, the territory in which you lived. America wasn't built on Christian values. It was built on the worst behavior of human beings. I mean, America was colonialized by white men from Europe who seized millions of people and put them to work for 100, sometimes up to 300 years. If you read the Bible, women are listed among property that you mustn't steal or covet. So, the family values that Christians talk about doesn't apply in the Bible. There's nowhere in the Bible that says you are to have one wife. It says to love your wives. There's a reason why in the Bible it says you're supposed to submit to your husband and not husbands, because women didn't have multiple husbands. They had multiple sister wives. I mean, the 12 tribes of Israel, all of those tribes named after the 12 men were from a polygamous relationship. 4 women birthed the 12 tribes of Israel. Biblical marriage is polygamy. It's seizing and assaulting women who unfortunately survived battle and war zones. Just because you marry a woman you take by force, wait 30 days, and then drag her into your tent doesn't make anything even